Hello, and welcome back. Tonight, we're going to be going over some of the most shocking glitch in the Matrix stories from around the web. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's get into the fearful findings. Elevators freak me out. The first time my mom believed me that weird stuff happened to me regularly. First off, I know this is nothing compared to other stories on here, but I chose to share because why not? Before and after this incident, several other things did and continue to happen to me. Strange things. I've just gotten used to it and have learned to appreciate them. So this was when I was about 8 in 2001. My mom, brother, aunt, and grandma had all traveled to Chicago to see Dinosaur Sue. We had been staying in a hotel nearby for about 5 days. It was very upscale, new, and overall very nice. Those entire 5 days, my mom would let me run ahead to the elevator when returning to our room from swimming, getting ice, etc., and let me ride up alone, since our room was right to the left of the elevator when you got off, and my grandma would always have the door cracked. So, one day, on the way back from the pool, literally just got out, wet hair, suit, towel, I did the same. Ran ahead and entered the elevator. Pressed the button for the 7th floor. There is only one elevator in this hotel, by the way. Once I got to the 7th floor, which I knew by the signs outside of the elevator, I went to the second door to the left, like I had maybe 20 times before that past week. I knocked and knocked. Nothing. I remember becoming weirdly alarmed at this point. Best way I can describe it. Even though I was smart enough to know I could always just return to the lobby, or that my mom would be arriving shortly. So, while wondering why my grandma wasn't answering the door, I returned the few feet to the elevator, and waited for my mom and brother. I saw on the display that the elevator was arriving on floor 7, the floor I was on, which was clearly written on the sign. I see the light, and hear the elevator ding. The doors open. Empty. At this point, I just feel something is very off and return to the door, knocking and crying now, getting cold because I'm still very wet from the pool. Finally, after no more than 1 minute, a very old woman answers the door and says, "Dear, I already told you yesterday, this is not your room." I had never been there yesterday. She then said, "It will be fine. I'm very sorry, but I'm on the phone with my son. Give it a few more minutes, your mother is coming," and freaking closed the door. I was shocked. Haha. I knew I was cute. And how can anyone close the door on a crying kid who lost their mother? Especially a woman who seemed like the caring grandmother type. Almost immediately after she closed the door, the elevator opened and my mom ran out crying and grabbed me. She was saying, "Oh honey, where were you? I've never been so worried." She then went to open the door. Not our room. She was stunned. The whole time I'm trying to explain I had been here, and my timeline of events had only been about 5 minutes. Her still hugging and holding me, she kinda just went into autopilot and went back into the elevator with me. She pressed 7 again. The doors closed super briefly, then reopened. The elevator didn't move at all. Once the door opened, we both saw my grandmother standing in the second door to the left crying, and then very happy, running to hug us. Apparently, I had been missing for 45 minutes. Police were called. Every floor had been gone to. They were still in the process of knocking on all doors, opening even locked, vacant rooms. Apparently, my mother had decided to once more go and look at the pool to see if I had returned there. Then, after seeing it empty, she took the same, only elevator back up to 7. Only this time, out of the other multiple other times that day, she found me. And not only that, we were clearly not in the elevator hiding out, as it was the only one. And the police and staff had gone up and down the elevator multiple times looking for me. We still talk about it to this day and can't explain it. My hair was still wet, The police were kind of pissed until the hotel staff pulled up the camera showing me getting on the elevator, but then never getting off. Then, what was the creepiest was that when my mother got on from the lobby, you see her get on, and then 10 minutes passed, and then she gets off at floor 7 with me in her arms. They went through all cameras on all floors, which had very clear angles of the elevator on each floor. Nothing. I swear the staff was freaked out, as were the police. They were almost convinced someone had taken me, and then became freaked out and left me shortly after. They were stumped as to why my hair was still wet, but they couldn't refute the cameras, as they were high resolution, working correctly and everything. I've always wanted to call back and see if they still talk about it years later. I just don't want to mess with it. Because it's not like I even see the event as serving a purpose, you know? I have no clue who the woman was, nor was I ever able to identify her. Because for the investigation, even after they found me, they locked down the hotel and all possible exits and had a perimeter. Chicago does not fuck around, by the way, with possible abductions. Every guest in the hotel was more than happy to help. Women from ages 50 on all willingly let police take photos. Not one of them was the woman. This woman had very blue eyes, like very... The only possible connection I can think of is that the woman and I almost had identical eyes. I have kind of a rare color for how dark my hair is. I don't know. I answered a call at work from another dimension. So, few key things here before I get into it. I work the front desk at an internal medicine clinic. All the phones are Cisco phones that have caller ID and a history log. I worked here for 3 years, and I know pretty much all of the patients extremely well. So well that our doctor will ask me if someone is our patient or not because I can remember extremely insignificant details off the top of my head, such as a person's middle initial and their name. I'm the only person who works the front desk, so unless I'm already on a call, I answer every phone call coming into the clinic. Because I answer every call, I know many patients just by the sound of their voice, especially if they call frequently. The doctor I work for doesn't take new patients, so we don't have an extremely high number of patients. This is also why I know so many patients so well, because it's mostly the same people over and over, with rarely any new faces to learn. The patient in question during this event I know super well, because he has the pseudo-bulbar effect where you cry or laugh in inappropriate situations. I worked there when he was diagnosed, and it's kind of a rare disease, so I remember him especially well, because he often has episodes in the waiting room while checking in, and I try to make him as comfortable as possible by acting as if nothing is out of the ordinary. I would say he's one of my favorites because he's a very sweet and kind man, regardless, and has treated me with nothing but respect. Unfortunately, not the case for all of our patients. Because of the pandemic, and given that most of our patients come to appointments with no acute problems, the office is doing pretty much every appointment as telemedicine, with a few exceptions here and there for things that absolutely can't be treated over the phone. Telemedicine here is just a normal phone call, because the physician isn't very tech-savvy. The majority of our patient population is geriatric, so they really are tech-savvy either, so we don't do video chat or anything like that. The office is small. We have 1 physician, 2 nurses, and me, and I work in a separate but very open room with a big checkout window and a door on the same side that stays open facing the desk that the physician and 1 nurse sit at. We can just talk normally across the room to hear each other. So generally, I kinda zone out while the doctor is doing telemedicine appointments, but subconsciously listen for key words or phrases that he usually says every single time before he sends the call to me when he's done to schedule the patient's next follow-up appointment. I'm halfway through listening, and I know that he's on the phone, and this patient calls in that I mentioned earlier with the pseudo-bulbar effect. We'll call him Mr. L. And Mr. L says that he was on the phone with the doctor for his telemedicine appointment, but the call dropped. Not a big deal. This happens somewhat often, I said back to him. I think he's on the phone with someone right now. Let me check for you. Hold on 1 sec. And put him on hold. I was double-checking that he was on a patient call and not a personal call. The doctor will literally talk on his cell phone to friends about everything in the world, i.e. hunting, fishing, football. You get the picture. He's older and doesn't really text, just talks on the phone a lot. All the time, but he'll only call patients on the desk and the Cisco phone. So, I see that he was talking on the desk phone, obviously talking to a patient, I assume. He would never make a personal call on the Cisco desk phones because our company records every phone call. And I picked the phone back up after being put on hold and said, "Hey, Mr. L, he's on the phone with another patient right now. Just stay by your phone and I'll get him to call you right back." But when I picked it up from hold, there wasn't anybody there. So I start saying, "Hello," a few times before hanging up because it was just dead silent. The nurse who sits behind the doctor on the other side of the room turns around to face me and says, "Wait, who did you just hang up with?" And I say, "Mr. L." "Why?" She replied back to me and said, "Because that's who he's talking to right now." Keep in mind, the doctor is still on the phone as she's telling me this. And she tells me he's been on the phone with Mr. L this entire time. I knew without a doubt from the moment Mr. L called in that the doctor was on a call already and was on this call the entire time with 0 interruptions. Me and the nurse are just extremely bewildered by this, and by the time the doctor was done with his call and had sent it to me to schedule the next appointment, I asked Mr. L if his call had dropped at any point in time, or if he called the office in the last few minutes. For telemedicine appointments, the doctor calls the patient, not the other way around. He told me, "Well, I dropped my phone on the floor, but I just picked it back up and kept talking." He seemed confused by my question, so I didn't push it any further. Me and the nurse who realized this then checked the call log history, and it confirmed that the doctor's phone had a call with Mr. L for about 13 minutes without any interruption, and my phone also had a call during that call from the same number. His first and last name also shows up on caller ID, and it was on both phones. I confirmed with the doctor that his call was with Mr. L, who was never interrupted, and he confirmed that it wasn't at any time. When I told him what happened, he just chuckled and said we were living in the Twilight Zone and had 0 logical explanation for it. I also recognized his voice, and there is 0 doubt in my mind that it was indeed Mr. L I spoke to. So, the only reasonable explanation the nurse that witnessed this and I could seem to come up with is that maybe in another dimension, when Mr. L dropped his phone on the floor and it did drop the call, and when he called back, I answered in this dimension, but he was disconnected after I put it on hold, since it was radio silence after I picked it back up. Honestly, if you have any reasonable explanation other than it was just someone else calling in, because I know that was impossible, the call history log backed up that it was the exact same phone number, and I know that it was his voice. Feel free to shoot them below. I'm honestly just mind-blown by this, and while I was never disbelieving of alternate dimensions before, I was skeptical because of lack of hardcore proof. This has definitely convinced me. TLDR, I answered a phone call from a person who was simultaneously talking to someone else in the same room, and this was backed up by a call history log. My timeline split this weekend, and I have the timeline to prove it. Mama raised a sailor. Please excuse the explicit wording. The purpose of sharing this experience is to find answers, not for attention or any sort of money. I am genuinely confused, and to be quite honest, I am slightly terrified. I can only think of 2 possible explanations. Either multiple timelines exist, or there is another me running around with a copy of my cell phone. Hopefully, by the end of reading this, you will have a theory of your own, one that helps me sleep at night. I'm going to include specific times to help paint a very clear timeline for the reader. This fiasco began on Saturday night, the same night as Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor's 3rd UFC matchup. My current roommate, we'll call him Rambo, and our old roommate, we'll call him Thinkle, and I were enjoying the TV doctor show House, while looking for a bar showing the prime ticket fight. At 7:45, I received a text from my friend, Shaggy, asking what I was up to. Shaggy recently moved into a new apartment, and he wanted me to come over and hang for a bit, check out the new place. I honestly was too tired to go in public to watch the event, so this was a great excuse. I got the address and finished watching the episode of House before putting my shoes on and heading out the door. I left and headed for Shaggy's apartment at 9:02 p.m. Along the way, I stopped and picked up a 5-pack of Backwoods Black Russian Cream at a familiar tobacco shop near Shaggy's. I called Shaggy at 9:39 p.m. as I was approaching his neighborhood, and again at 9:45 p.m. to figure out where to park. Shaggy was already pretty drunk when I arrived. He had been throwing back beers all evening. He offered me a cold PBR when I walked through the door, and I accepted. We chatted, took turns playing new songs we've discovered while I rolled a spicy cigar to smoke. Finished smoking at around 11:15 p.m. We went inside and freestyled over some Lipton Metals for about 10 minutes until all of the beer caught up with Shaggy, and he went to the bathroom to throw up. I continued to rap by myself for another 15 minutes, now 11:41 p.m. when I finished recording, until my drunk friend finally comes from the bathroom and tells me he's ready to go to bed. Understanding, I gather my belongings, finish the beer I received when I entered, Shaggy and I say our goodbyes, and I am off. Out the door and on the road no later than 11:55 p.m. I headed home. It's a 19-mile drive, and I've only had one beer over the course of 2 hours. I felt fine. That is, this version of me. The version that is writing this felt fine. The other version of me was too drunk and needed help. At 12:01 a.m., this is approximately 12 minutes after I left Shaggy's apartment, I received a phone call from Finkel. I answered the phone. Finkel sounds groggy and irritated. I thought he was drunk. The phone call went something like this. Me reluctantly answers. I thought he was calling drunk, looking for a ride. Finkel, what's up, bro? I'm here, where are you? Me, confused. I'm on my way back now. Where are you? Finkel, we're here to get you, bro. Just unlock the door and let us in. Me, I'm not home yet. It's still about 20 minutes out. Finkel, bro, just open the door. We're here to help you. Me, help me? What are you talking about? Are you locked out? Where are Rambo's keys? Finkel, must have left them at the bar. Whatever, bro, just hurry up. Okay, dude. Well, I'm still 25-ish minutes away, so I'll be there soon. I hung up the phone, a little irritated and confused. My music resumes after the phone call, but I pause it because I need to think. That was a bizarre phone call. It's not like Rambo to get drunk enough to lose his keys and drive home. But it's not entirely out of character for Finkwood to get belligerent, so I let it go after a few minutes of pondering. Besides, at this point, I was about 15 minutes away from home. A few more turns and I'd be there to let the drunks inside and figure out what the situation was. 12:14 a.m., that's when I get another phone call. This time, it's from Rambo's cell phone. I answer, this time, with complete irritation in my voice. Me, what's up, bro? I'm gonna be there soon. What do you all need? Rambo, also irritated. What do you mean? Where are you? We came here to get you. Me, came where, bro? I'm on my way back to our apartment. Where are y'all? Rambo, why did you leave if you called us to come get you? Or why the fuck are you driving if you're drunk? Me, I didn't call anyone. Finkel called me asking where I was, and I told him I'm on the way home. I'm also not drunk. I had one beer. What are you talking about? Rambo, bro, what are you talking about? You just fucking called us twice and said you were drunk and sick and needed us to come get you from Finkel's apartment. Me, no, I swear on everything. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm not drunk. I had a single beer, but I'm 8 minutes from home if you want to meet there. Rambo, what the fuck then? Who was on the phone with us and told us to come get them? 'Cause it sounded just like you, claimed to be you, and came from your number. Bro, I don't know what the fuck or how the fuck, but that sounds like some glitch in the Matrix type shit or something. Rambo, so, you're not drunk? You're fine to drive? Me, nah man, like I said, I had one fucking PBR. I feel pretty much sober. Finkel grabs the phone from Rambo. Well, what the hell, bro? If you're not drunk, come meet us at the bar we just left. Me. Okay, I'll be there in 6. The three of us pull up to the bar around the same time. We all grabbed seats around the table outside. The bar was pretty packed. Lots of people were out to watch the UFC event. Despite the fight having a very unexpected and dramatic outcome, we immediately start to discuss and try to dissect what the fuck just happened. Finkel and Rambo had been at the bar for a few hours already, watching the UFC event and chatting with the local drunks and college students. During their shenanigans, Finkel received a phone call from my cell phone number at 11:55 p.m., when I would have just been leaving Shaggy's apartment and getting onto the road. According to Rambo, he saw my number pop up and watched Finkel's facial expression change from happy to concerned within a matter of seconds. Finkel steps outside to finish the phone call, where, allegedly, I was drunk as piss and curled up in front of Finkel's apartment, and I was not okay. I was sick and needed help getting to a bathroom, proper hydration, and of course a floor or couch to crash on after. Finkel walked back into the bar and explained the situation to Rambo. Allegedly, I called back at 11:57 p.m. Rambo answers this time, and I give him the same drunken story, to which he realizes I'm not okay, and then needed to leave the bar to come get me. The bar is about 5 to 6 minutes away, maybe 4 if you're speeding and there's no traffic, which there wasn't because it was midnight. This brings us to our 12:01 a.m. phone call to sober me, where Finkel arrives at his apartment and it's wondering where I went. After they wait on me for a few more minutes, we have our 12:14 a.m. phone call, also to sober and current me, where we ultimately decide to meet at the bar to figure out what's going on. The strange thing to me is that the phone logs. Finkel's phone call history clearly had 2 calls from my cell phone number, the first at 11:55 p.m. and the second at 11:57 p.m. Neither of those calls were placed from my cell phone, nor was I the one on the other end of the line saying I'm drunk and in need of help. I've lived with these 2 guys for the better part of the last 20 months. I know their voices well, and just as well, they should know mine. The fact that the phone log exists, and it shows my phone number, and these 2 separate individuals are in full belief that they were speaking to drunk me on the phone, is downright terrifying. It was not me on the phone with my friends. I didn't sleep well last night thinking about this. My best explanation would be maybe my timeline split. And in this timeline, I went to Shaggy's apartment and only had 1 beer. But in another timeline, I went somewhere and got drunk and found my way back to Finkel's apartment, called him, and then Finkel and Rambo in this timeline somehow doubt those phone calls. I wonder what happened to drunk me that night, locked outside of Finkel's apartment. I wonder if I've ever talked to someone else from a different timeline. I wonder if it's even a timeline split, or maybe someone fucked up the spaghetti code for our universe. I listen to quite a bit of true crime podcasts, such as Crime Junkie. From time to time, during investigations, detectives will narrow down the location of a cell phone call based off of cell phone tower pings. I wonder if this technique could be applied here to figure out if this call came from this dimension or not. If drunk me calls from Finkel's apartment at 11:53 and 11:57 p.m., then there is no physical way I can also be 19 miles away at 12:01 when he calls me back looking for me. If anyone has had any similar experiences of any people you know speaking to an alternate version of you, let me know. Or, if you have any theories of your own, please share. I'm looking for anything to put my mind at ease. This situation is very unsettling for me. I'm scared I'm going to fade away and be forgotten. TLDR. My friends got 2 phone calls from me claiming I was drunk and sick and needed help. But I was fine, and I was not the one that called them. "10 years ago, I went on a date with someone claiming to be a time traveler. Hello everyone. When I, male, 30, was in my early 20s, I had a strange encounter with a man who claimed to be from my future. I'm not entirely sure that this could be considered a glitch. However, this incident was definitely peculiar, and I haven't been able to completely forget about it since. Admittedly, some details are now hazy, as this happened to me over 10 years ago. But I have tried my hardest to remember as much information as I could, in hopes of getting some closure. Apologies in advance if the story doesn't meet the subreddit criterion. Please feel free to direct me elsewhere. Around 2011, I was taking Japanese math classes once per week at a local university here in the UK. At the time, my classes would finish around 9 p.m., and I would usually return home by a train. I was still living with my parents back then, and I distinctly remember having a small window of time to catch the infrequent night train back to my hometown after my lessons would end. It was winter, and I recall the station being busy with Christmas shoppers. I had unfortunately missed my usual train and had to wait over an hour for the next arrival. I was looking up at the live departure board with frustration when I was approached by a friendly American man in his early to mid-40s. I remember he was underdressed for the weather, or even the season, as it had been snowing for days and was particularly cold outside. Wearing only a baseball cap, a sweatshirt, and a light windbreaker. Nothing about this struck me as odd at the time, as I gather he must be a tourist who hadn't anticipated how cold it would be. Back then, I was incredibly shy, wasn't the type to strike up conversations with strangers. However, I recall feeling entirely at ease from the moment I saw him. He was tall, athletic, and spoke with a strong accent. He was friendly and approachable. Nothing about him gave off any warning signals. If anything, I was taken aback at how unconventionally attractive he was. Our first interaction was brief. He initiated our conversation by asking if I had been waiting long, in which I naturally replied out of politeness if he had been stuck waiting for a while too. He was, in fact, waiting for a friend and had just gotten into town. This quickly evolved into us both making small talk, with him introducing himself as John. Eventually, he asked if I wanted to grab a coffee on the account of how easily we hit things off. My train was due to arrive, and I didn't have much time, so John quickly asked if I wanted to pick up where we left off again over coffee tomorrow. I agreed, we exchanged numbers, and I left to catch my train home. I remember after this instance, I had a feeling similar to déjà vu. It was like a wave of familiarity had washed over me. I was 100% sure that I had never met John in my life. However, I was left with this strange, overwhelming feeling after departing. I felt intrigued by him. When I arrived home, I received a few text messages from John, and we agreed to meet up in the same location the following day. At this time in my life, I was still closeted and hadn't come out to my parents as being gay, and I wasn't prepared to tell them I was meeting with a stranger. I usually pride myself on being a good judge of character, and I wouldn't have agreed to meet with John if I didn't feel the situation was safe. After all, it was difficult to meet guys at that age, and I wasn't about to pass up the opportunity of a date with a handsome, older dude who I just felt an abundance of chemistry with. However, I did make sure to let some of my friends know my situation, in case anything were to happen. The following day, John was waiting for me at the same location we had met the night before. Despite the freezing weather, he was still wearing the same light clothing and baseball cap. I can recall him being incredibly charming, and I felt the same overwhelming sensation of being familiar with him from the moment we met. I was definitely curious, and I was eager to find out more about him. At this point, we couldn't decide on a location and wandered aimlessly around before deciding to grab a coffee at a local Starbucks. As we started to make conversation, I noticed that he was only interested in talking about what I had to say. I remember that he seemed overly happy to be talking with me. When I would speak, he was often so excited that he would barely let me finish before moving on to another topic of conversation. I almost got the impression that he knew what I was about to say already. For instance, he knew that I had a sister. I also noticed that he would rarely talk about himself, often sidestepping my questions or changing the flow of the conversation when I asked him anything directly. He was definitely quirky, and for the most part, we spoke about our shared interests. I remember thinking he was odd, but I definitely did not feel suspicious of him, despite the fact he seemed rather private. The only information I remember about him was that he was from America, but has been traveling for some time. claimed to play several instruments, was in a band, and not mention having a troubled religious upbringing. However, this is where things get strange. John and I left the coffee shop and decided to go for another walk around the city. We spoke for a long time, and I remember we had been laughing a lot and generally enjoying the time we had spent together. However, we eventually stopped along the riverfront that runs throughout my city, leaning over a bridge as we spoke some more about each other's lives. This is when John asked if he could give me a hug. I remember looking up at him, and his expression seemed to genuinely melancholic all of a sudden, almost bittersweet. Although I was feeling a little confused, I said of course, and hesitantly leaned in for the embrace. I remember he hugged me incredibly tight, and when we eventually let go, there was tears in his eyes. I asked him if he was okay, and what was going on. Admittedly, now feeling incredibly confused and a little concerned by what was happening all of a sudden. To which he said that I was never going to believe him. I can't quite remember the entire flow of the conversation that followed. However, I will try to summarize everything as best as I can. We took a seat on a nearby bench, where I remember his composure was incredibly calm, and he said everything with the sincerest conviction. He told me that he was someone from my near future, and that we knew each other very well. He told me that he had traveled back in time to visit me. However, he was incredibly adamant about not answering how or why he managed to do so, only stating that it was recreational and that time travel doesn't work how we think. Stating to me that he had only wanted to visit me once more, adding that I was much younger than he had anticipated and that I looked so different from what he knew me, almost hinting that he had found me at the wrong age. I could tell that there was a feeling of sadness throughout everything he was telling me, as he kept repeating over and over how happy he was to see me, yet said everything with tears in his eyes. I instantly began taking everything he was saying as a joke, feeling skeptical, and I'm ready to leave immediately. I remember standing up and telling him I had to go. The information was too much for me to process, and I felt the same overwhelming flood of deja vu creep back into my system. The sensation was so intense that I remember trembling as I stood up to leave, with the atmosphere around me suddenly experiencing a drop in pressure. This is when he took me by the hand and said, "I'll see you again someday." I ran away without saying anything. I remember being so overcome by emotion that I burst out crying as soon as I got out of sight. Afterwards, I was so confused and disturbed by the situation, and it took me days to process it all before attempting to articulate it to my younger sister and friends, all of whom remember the incident as the crazy tourist I once went on a date with. However, 10 years have passed, and I can't help but feel affected by this incident, as every now and then I remember the face of John and the strange feeling of contentment and familiarity I had when around him. After our date, I remember trying to text or call the number he had contacted me on, only to be notified that the number no longer exists by an automated message. He had seemingly vanished without a trace, with no further instances of seeing or being contacted by him since. This definitely could have been a case of an individual who was clearly unhinged, but it was so eerie that I haven't been able to forget about it. I have always wondered who John was, or perhaps who I was to him in this possible future. Nowadays, I am currently in a happy relationship with my partner of 6 years, whom I have no intention of ever leaving, and every time I recall this enigmatic encounter I had with John, and I can't help but wonder if I'd glimpsed into a possible or parallel future, one where things have drastically changed for me on a personal level. I have so many questions surrounding what he told me. Was I still alive in his time? Were we romantically involved? Was he a future colleague, or even family? Every time I recall these long, distant memories, I am overcome by an unexplainable wave of emotion, almost like I've lost something. It's incredibly hard for me to articulate the feeling I felt that night. I've never been able to forget about it, and I'm entirely sure that I would still recognize John today if I encountered him again. This is the first time I have ever shared the full version of this story outside of my immediate circle, but after discovering the community here, I felt the need to share. Has anyone ever experienced anything similar? Or have perhaps read other relatable stories? suggestions, or ideas? I felt almost haunted by this meeting since it happened, and would like a little insight from those more experienced in theories/concepts of time travel. TLDR, strange chance encounter with a man who confessed to being from my future during a date 10 years ago. That's not my neighbor. I have thought for the last 2 years that this event was a Mandela effect, but after finding this sub, starting to think that maybe it was a glitch. Anyone else have something so blatant happen? I'm hesitant to tell this story. No one believes it, even my husband who saw the whole thing, but here we go. My neighbor is directly across the street from me. They're married and expecting a baby. The wife is a tiny blonde woman, very Caucasian, very tiny build. We wave to each other daily and yell salutations across the street. She goes into labor, and they leave for the hospital. A week later, I see the car is returned, so I bake some cookies to take over and congratulate them. Another day or two goes by, and I see a thick, brunette lady outside with a baby, and I wave, assuming it's a relative that's come to help with the newborn. A few more days pass, and I see the husband outside with the brunette and the baby, so I take the cookies over. It's her. It's the wife. Same name, same personality, and same demeanor, except now she's a thick, kinda tall, brunette Pacific Islander. The husband doesn't acknowledge any difference. She talks to me and treats me the way she always has, but it's a totally different person. My husband noticed this as well. We made some jokes about him wife swapping at the hospital, but since he can't wrap his brain around it, he starts to believe that she's always been this person, even though he clearly remembers her teeny and blonde. I feel like everyone has lost their minds. It's been almost 2 years since that shift, and she's still a thick, tall brunette, and then I feel like maybe I've lost my mind. My only consolation is that my husband remembers it too, if only vaguely. Update 1. So, I showed the picture I found of her to my husband last night. He's a little bit of a mess about it. The man is not a conspiracy guy, at all, but he remembered her. He started asking some questions and tossing around ideas about what could have happened. I convinced him to go to the church this morning and attend their service. I spoke briefly with the pastor and said my neighbor had recommended that I attend. He was grateful she was sending people his way, even though, get this, she hadn't attended since she had the baby. She apparently changed churches to one a little closer when she gave birth, so I don't know where to go next, except for putting some feelers out there in the neighborhood and finding an excuse to hang out with her. Update 2. I'm so sorry that took so long. I didn't want to update until I had spoken directly to my neighbor. So, I endured the heat all week and spent way too much on flowers to plant in an attempt to run into my neighbors. The old lady next door doesn't remember the neighbor's wife having blonde hair, but her middle-aged daughter does. She said, "Yeah, that was a couple years ago. I don't know why she went so dark. I thought it would wash her out." When I pointed out that it wouldn't wash her out because her complexion is tan now, she looked confused. Said that maybe she had been tanning because she did look darker. I pushed it a little further and asked if she also seemed taller, but she seemed stuck on the fact that the very Caucasian blonde woman had gotten tan enough for such dark hair to look natural. She gave me several reasons, but didn't seem convinced either. I also spoke to the changed lady's next-door neighbor, then mentioned her having blonde hair. Neither he nor his wife ever remember her being blonde. They both agreed she had dark hair on move-in day. Yesterday, I finally cornered changed neighbor lady outside. She pulled up with groceries, and I offered to help carry them with her. I started talking about the church and how I had spoken with the pastor. She said some really nice stuff about the church, but also that she needed a church closer, and that's why she had switched. When I pointed out that her new church was actually farther away, she said she had never actually measured it, but it seemed closer. I pointed out that her old church was in our town, and her new church is in the next town over. And she said the back roads must just make it seem shorter. Some red flags popped up here, because the back roads around here are long, windy roads that circle around our town and pass by all the farmland. It doesn't ever make things quicker. It's a nicer drive, sure, but it always adds a good chunk to the drive time. Also, the new church is in the middle of the town, 2 streets over from Main Street, so if you take the back roads, you actually have to circle back to get onto the main roads to get to it anyways. It would be much more convenient to take a direct route using the town's roads that connect the 2 towns. It's almost a straight shot from the middle of our town to the next town over. I don't know why that bothered me, but it did. After a little while of small talk, I brought up the hair. I said that I was trying to go blonde to hide some gray that I have coming in, and did she have any tits? She laughed and said the last time she was blonde, she was in high school, and it was a mess, so she didn't recommend it. I pointed out that she was blonde right before having her baby, and she got really weird, almost offensive, and said she hadn't. She had only tried to go blonde at one time in high school, and it turned orange, so she dyed it back immediately. I told her I chalked it up to pregnancy brain because she was definitely blonde while she was pregnant. She ended the conversation shortly after and thanked me for my help, but you could tell she was annoyed with me. So guys, not super sure what I've learned other than the girl next door to me, old lady's daughter, and I are going to have another chat. She made me feel like she remembered, but she couldn't wrap her head around it. I'm going back to church on Sunday to poke around and talk to some more people. Any more ideas? Final update. Sorry it's been so long, and honestly, it's embarrassing. The more I looked into it, the more everyone around me thought I was nuts. I have a nice life, good parents, a husband, and kids. They could not understand why I'm obsessed with the neighbor. I'm still very sure of what happened, and I'm still super curious, but I had to back off so my family didn't have me committed. Not really, but they don't get it at all. I started to think that they thought I was having a nervous break, so I dropped it. I have only kept a peripheral neighborhood gossip approach. Burnett doesn't live there anymore. Neighborhood speculation is that they're getting divorced. She took the kid and the car after Viking dude got drunk while alone with their kid, hit his head on the counter, and was in a coma for 2 weeks. ETA, he came back the same, skinnier, but is still blonde Viking guy. I've seen her twice in the last 3 months when she was picking up her and the kid stuff. I wish I knew what happened. I'd love a conclusion. I never got an answer, and trying to play sleuth made my family think I was losing it. I keep my crazy mostly to myself now. Thank God for Reddit, or I'd never have the chance to toss around ideas. I appreciate the community, and I appreciate you for remembering after this long. I remember too, even if it makes me sound crazy. I lost 6 hours that I can't find any logical explanation for. It haunts me, and I need serious answers. TODR, I lost time. No drugs, alcohol, signs of carbon monoxide poisoning, or previous episodes of lost time apply. And I wasn't lying down or even sitting when it happened. What happened? This will be quite long, as I'm including answers to the questions I think might be asked, so please bear with me. 3 years ago, I was living at a house with my adult daughter, my cat, and her 2 cats. I went to bed early one night and woke up around 5 a.m. unable to get back to sleep, so I had a shower and started doing housework. After a few hours, my whole house was spotless, and I felt great. I made myself a pancake for breakfast and sat down to eat just as my daughter woke up and started rushing around getting ready for work. She had a 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. shift that day and had woken up late. At 8:45, she asked me to call her a taxi while she finished getting ready. At 8:50, I was putting my breakfast dishes in the sink as the taxi pulled into my driveway. My daughter asked me to feed her cats because she hadn't had time, and then she rushed out. I put fresh food and water down for my cat and headed to the laundry room in the basement to feed her cats. They had to be fed separately because my cat is a pig and will eat all of the food. I filled her cat's bowls, put them on the floor. One began to eat right away, and the other begged for a morning cuddle. I picked him up and cuddled him for a couple minutes, then put him down to eat and headed back upstairs with the intention of grabbing a nap for a couple hours. I wanted to be awake before noon because that's when the cats got all their daily temptation treats. To get to my bedroom on the second floor, I have to pass by the kitchen. As I passed, I noticed the clock in the microwave. It said 2:53. I assumed it had been unplugged at some point and was showing the wrong time. I was going to reset it, but I checked every clock in the house and my phone, and they were all the same. Even if I got lost in thought while cuddling the cat, it should have been no later than 9:05 a.m. I sat down, stunned, and tried to make sense of it, but I couldn't, because if I lost track of time doing something I don't remember, there should have been evidence of it, and there wasn't. My house looked exactly as I'd left it when I'd headed to the basement, and other than the confusion and growing concern, I didn't feel any differently either. At about 3:20 p.m., my daughter returned home from work and told me all about her day. Then I told her about mine. You left? I fed the cats. Then it was 2:53 p.m., and I don't remember doing anything else while you were gone. What I know for sure. The house faces east and the sun was still shining brightly in the living room window when I headed down to the basement, so I know I didn't lose those hours before heading down the stairs. No incoming or outgoing calls were showing on my phone that day, other than to call the taxi. The browser history in my computer showed no activity for that day. I was wearing the same clothes when I came upstairs as I had on when I went downstairs, and there was nothing about them or on them that would indicate what I might have done or where I was for so long. None of the neighbors I asked said they saw me that day. I have old spinal injuries that cause extreme pain if I don't move and stretch up my back at least every half hour, and my back wasn't sore at all, so I know I didn't stay in one position for 6 hours. I have low blood sugar. It drops dangerously low and makes me feel violent if I don't have at least a piece of fruit between meals, and I felt fine even though there was no evidence that I had eaten anything after breakfast. I have to pee frequently enough that I get up twice in the night to use the bathroom. If I don't, my full bladder puts pressure on the injured disc in my back and causes pain. I should have needed to empty my bladder at least twice in that 6 hours, and my bladder still didn't feel full. There's no bathroom in my basement, and being a woman, there should have been evidence if I had emptied my bladder anywhere else in the house. No evidence was found, and the house still smelled fresh and clean. I even checked the litter boxes and the drains in a desperate attempt to find some clue that would indicate what I'd done during the missing hours. My arms weren't aching and sore when I put the cat down after cuddles, so I know I didn't hold him for 6 hours, even if he would have let me, which I doubt. I had no injuries or soreness that would indicate I'd fallen unconscious on the basement floor or on my way up the stairs. As a smoker, going 6 hours without a cigarette makes the muscles in my jaw tense. There were no cigarettes missing from my pack, no tension in my jaw, and the ashtray was still clean. My bed was still made with no sign that I'd been in it or on it since I cleaned my room that morning. I hadn't been on any prescription medication for at least 3 years prior to that day. The only over-the-counter medications I take are anti-inflammatories when my back gets sore, and Tums for acid indigestion, and I hadn't taken either for days. Nor have either ever had a strange effect on me before or since. I've been smoking marijuana on and off since 1979 for stress, but always from a trusted supplier, and I hadn't had any for at least a week prior. There was nothing in my life causing me stress at the time. I had a non-epileptic seizure disorder since early childhood, but hadn't had a seizure for several years by then, nor any since. My seizures were caused by stress and poor nutrition, neither of which were a factor that day or in the weeks leading up to it. I typically only drink alcohol at New Year's, so it had been months since I had any. I don't take any hard drugs like LSD, PCP, cocaine, methamphetamines, nothing. I have mental health issues, BPD, OCD, PTSD, none of which cause hallucinations or lost time that I know of, and all of which were under control for at least 2 years by then, thanks to intensive therapy. I've never had a hallucination, and I've never experienced unexplainable loss of time before or since. Other than confusion, which is reasonable given the circumstances, I suffered no other symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning in the days leading up to that day or since, and I had a carbon monoxide detector in my home that registered nothing. I've run through every sane and insane possibility in my head repeatedly since it happened, and still can't figure it out. It's like I'd bounced forward in time somewhere between putting the cat down at the bottom of the stairs and reaching the top of the stairs. I'm not saying I believe that happened, but short of being possessed by some entity that not only made sure I ate, peed, and stretched out my back, but also carefully removed all evidence of my activities, I honestly don't know what to make of this. I do plan to consult a psychiatrist about it soon, as my health insurance is renewed, hopefully this week, because it keeps creeping back to the forefront of my memory, and I can't seem to get past it. But I'd appreciate any feedback I can get before then. For anyone wondering, I do like to write, but only poetry. I have no interest in being published. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading. I work at a popular sandwich shop, and I think I may have made a sandwich for a paranormal entity / time traveler / matrix glitcher. I know a fair amount of these stories are feasible to explain, and are basic coincidences at most, but hear me out. This may be long, but I was thoroughly disturbed last night at work, and it seems like a glitch for me to have even found this subreddit the day after my experience. Let me just say that I'm known to be a pretty observant guy. All my friends and family who know me, even slightly well, are aware that I notice everything. It is pretty hard to slip something past me. Not to say I'm proud or a cocky asshole or anything, but it's just a little background into me before you read this long-ass story. Thank you. I have worked at this sandwich joint for over 1.5 years. We run a tight-knit crew. I am a good employee, in good standing with the owner and manager, and I am a little bit of a night crew manager myself. The restaurant itself is very slow, as we tend to receive maybe 20 to 30 customers within my entire 6 to 7 hour closing shift. This means that I naturally tend to start conversations with customers. I like to figure out where people work their day jobs, where they went to college, how their lives are, and all that stuff. You could say I get personal, but hey, people like it when you're not just a robotic employee. I even met a dude who went to Berkeley Law School, and he told me a lot about life and school and all that, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I like to talk to people. It gets me through the days, you know. And generally, people are pretty damn nice about it. I even have a mini little arsenal of conversation progression. Just headed home after a long day's work, huh? Nice. Where do you work at? Oh, that sounds cool. Did you have a degree for that? Oh, nice. Where'd you go to college? Did you like it there? Most conversations are extended versions of that, and it usually gets interesting hearing about such diverse backgrounds. About a week or so ago, this man came in. I would say early 30s, dark hair, dark features, sweatpants, a Nike sweatshirt, and hood up. It was late at night, say 9:30ish, and I was ready to close this bad boy up and get home, but had another half hour to kill. So I said, screw it. Let's start a conversation with this guy. Maybe his dad is like a congressman or something cool. Maybe I'll learn something from him. Holy hell, this guy was creepy as shit. He wouldn't meet my direct eye line. He would talk to me by looking above or between my eyes. He kept his left hand tucked in the back of his pants' waistline. I realize that sentence is a bit hard to visualize, but the best visual I can give is like when people tuck a gun on the back of their pants. It was like he was clutching a gun. He kept his hand there the entire time. He was looking nervous and reluctant, as most people who commit robberies do. And as the sandwich-making process progressed, I was becoming more and more sure that I was about to be robbed. He asked for a ham sandwich on white bread. The way we lay the ham is pretty formulaic, but due to his creepy demeanor, I was admittedly feeling nervous. The 8 slices of ham ended up being folded over at different ratios, laid on top of each other sloppily, and did not look too appetizing of a sandwich. The man asked for Swiss cheese. The formula calls for 4 slices, so, as I always do, I picked up a stack of the triangularly cut cheese and fanned it all out in such a way where I can grab 4 and throw the rest back into the pile. I laid the cheese in a less than orderly fashion, and the sandwich is still clearly missing its picture perfectness that you see on TV. These details may seem irrelevant, but I just want you to know the gist of it. You'll see why. The man asked if I could toast his sandwich. This means that I would have to turn my back to him for a few seconds to throw it into the toaster. I was running a lot of shit through my mind, and I was not prepared to turn my back to him. This caused a sort of mini panic, and I grabbed his sandwich and attempted to stand in such a way where I could keep my eye on him with my waist twisted enough to get the sandwich into the toaster, but still be looking at him. As you may have guessed, I dropped it. I dropped the sandwich. I made a basic attempt to catch it as it fell, you know? Kind of like flared my knee up and tried to use my waist as a sort of cushion to hold up my elbow to catch the sandwich, but to no avail. I guess just imagine fumbling with your phone and the weird motions your body makes in an attempt to catch it right as you realize you dropped it. You get the idea. I was panicking hardcore. Splat. In a few seconds before I looked up, I was bracing myself for a very angry creep staring at me. But he was gone. He had left. He vanished. I didn't even hear the shriek of the door, the footsteps, nothing. I ran outside. I looked left, looked right, looked left again, and no cars were driving away. No cars were even remotely parked close enough for him to be hiding in or behind. He was just gone. The sandwich was still on the ground, fallen face down. One of the triangles of cheese landed in just perfect angular contrast with the tiles of the floor. Of the 8 pieces of ham on the sandwich, 6 were left betwixt the bread and the floor, while 2 pieces flew off and landed adjacent to the cabinet on top of which the toaster is located. Fast forward to last night. A man much older than the first comes in. I would say 60s, white hair, dark features, probably about 6'6". Was probably the tall, dark, and handsome dude in the 70s or something. Pretty nice man, up until he started ordering his sandwich. Fuck, I just got chills typing that last sentence, because I have no idea how to proceed with the story. It just gets unsettling for me. He ended up asking for white bread. I started to carry on my casual conversation. How's your night going, sir? Just getting off work? The man answered with a stern affirmative and offered no other information. Okay. Clearly this guy didn't want to talk about anything other than a sandwich. Weird. What kind of sandwich were you, sir? Ham. Alright. Pretty stern guy. No nonsense. Maybe he's like in the mafia or some shady shit. He got nervous when I asked about work. Alright, fine. Let me make your sandwich and you can get out of here, man. He then reaches behind his waist, in the exact same fucking way the first guy did. I swear to God, the gesture and motion were the exact same smoothness, timing, and form. He kept his left hand there, the exact same way the other man did about a week ago. The same way. Everything started eerily coming back to me now. It was like the most jolting deja vu moment I had ever had, and honestly I thought it was just that. Deja vu. But wait, there's more. The way I ended up laying the ham looked very, very familiar. The distance between each slice, the way each layer peeled off the stack in ratio to the next, the way the slices folded over. I can honestly swear to you that I was building the same fucking sandwich that I had built just a week ago. I was having one of those moments where a bunch of shit just passes through your mind all at once, and it's actually kind of surprising just how many thoughts you can have in such a short amount of time. But I remember telling myself to take the risk and just reach for the Swiss, because I just had the feeling. How did you know I wanted Swiss? I was taken aback. He actually wanted Swiss. How in the world do I pass it off as a lucky guess? Well, exactly how you would think. Lucky guess, I uttered as I let out a meager, pathetic little chuckle. The man proceeded to say the most spine-chilling thing I had ever heard. I read stories on Reddit about paranormal or weird shit happening to people. There's actually an Ask Reddit thread about it right now. I always see variations of the quote, "chill down my spine," and I've never really experienced that. I fucking experienced it last night. The man looks at me as if I told him I knew the winning lottery number for the next win. Very inquisitive look. Very, very strong sense of passion in his words when he said this. No. Seems like you've done this before. He just called out my deja vu. He just confirmed that he was aware of my deja vu. At this point, the phrase time traveler just made its first entrance into my mind. I looked at him with the most ridiculously awestruck impression. I sat there staring at him for a good 5 seconds before I laid the cheese. It was a surreal moment. It was like the climax of this confrontation had already happened, but I still needed to lay the cheese and veggies, roll the sandwich up, and then ring him in at the register. How much creepier is this gonna get? I just didn't get it. I picked up the cheese in the exact same way I always do, fan out the top 4 slices, and lay them down. I was looking down at the same sandwich I had built a week prior. I swear to you, the cheese, the bread, the ham, everything was just uncannily similar. I credit myself to be a rational dude, so at this point I was just calling it deja vu and trying not to feel disturbed. The man said just lettuce and mayo, no toast. Phew, not toasted. Thank the good Lord he didn't want it toasted. This fucking deja vu is over, and it's all just a coincidence, right? Well, some of you all may not know, but there is a thing called a hot food tax in some places. Therefore, when a sandwich is toasted, there is a button for hot food taxation, and it's something like 12 cents. So, as a force of habit, I read the order back to the customer in this fashion. "All right, sir, so, a ham sandwich not toasted with a bag of chips and 2 cookies." He looked very concerned with why I mentioned it was not toasted. Why did you have to specify that it's not toasted? Then I explained to him what I said above, all about the hot food tax and blah blah. Force of habit, because if a sandwich is toasted, you repeat the order like, "All right, a ham sandwich toasted with the chips and a drink," or something like that. After explaining that to them, he was just kind of inquisitive about it, nothing too weird. I didn't want to keep him any longer, so I took his card, swiped it, and could not wait for him to get the fuck out. As he walked out the door, he looked at me with the creepiest fucking smile you can conceive in your Reddity imaginations. He turns around and says what I honestly do not think I will ever forget. "Just to let you know, I did not toast the sandwich because of the tax. I'm not that much of a cheap bastard." Okay, the guy is trying to lighten the mood, right? Sweet. Yeah, I know he's not a cheap bastard. I mean, it's 12 cents. But he felt the need to tell me the real reason he didn't get it toasted. "I just didn't want you to drop it." And just like that, he was gone. Holy shit, I have chills everywhere. This was, without a doubt, the most spine-chilling thing I have ever experienced. I explained this whole thing to my father, and he came up with the idea that these 2 men were probably father and son, and were just fucking with me, and I am making up the rest of the details in my head. Impossible. Do you know why? The guy who owns the restaurant I work at owns one other, just one other, halfway across town. When Guy 1 came in, I was at the store that was about 8 miles away from the store that Guy 2 came in. The realistic chances of these 2 men knowing each other and tracking me down, finding me across town, and fucking with me like this isn't possible. I and 3 other employees, the manager of both stores, the morning shift leader, and my counterpart, the co-night shift manager, are the only 4 employees that jump between the 2 stores. The chances of this being planned and methodically prank is outrageous. I have no idea what I experienced. But if he actually took the time to read all this, please tell me if it is a legit glitch in the Matrix. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Also, please be sure to check out my Patreon, where I upload videos early, have polls to influence future uploads, and also have all uploads ad-free. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support. And have a good night.